There's something deeply unsettling about walking through an abandoned graveyard. The silence feels heavier, the air colder, as if the dead are still watching. In Kentucky, hidden far from busy roads, lie forgotten cemeteries where entire towns vanished but their graves remain. Locals whisper about strange lights, voices in the dark, and shadows that move when no one's there. These ghost town graveyards aren't just history, they're places where the past refuses to stay buried. If you enjoy these chilling stories, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more terrifying tales every week. Number 1. Paradise Cemetery. I never thought a hidden graveyard in an old ghost town would give me the most terrifying night of my life. In Muhlenberg County, Kentucky, there used to be a small town called Paradise. Many years ago, the coal plant and the smoke from the river made the air poisonous. People left the town, but the dead who were already buried there never left. That place is known as Paradise Cemetery. Last year, I went there with a few friends. It was late evening, almost dark, when we reached the cemetery. The path was old, covered with dirt, and ran between tall trees. As soon as we stepped near the graves, the air turned colder and heavier. It felt like someone was breathing on the back of my neck. The graves were hidden under weeds and broken stones. One grave had the year 1859 carved on it. I shined my flashlight at it, and suddenly I heard a soft woman's voice whispering behind me. It was clear, almost like words, but when I turned around, nobody was there. My friends laughed at first, but their laughter stopped as we walked deeper. In the center of the cemetery, one grave looked fresh, like someone had disturbed it. On the stone were long scratch marks, as if made by fingers clawing at night. Then the dirt on the grave began to shift, slowly rising and falling, as if something inside was pushing upward. My friend screamed, "Run!" We ran back toward the path, but I swear I could hear footsteps chasing us. Every time I looked over my shoulder, there was only darkness and trees, but the sound was real, heavy, dragging footsteps, right behind us. Somehow, we made it back to the car, shaking and out of breath. Since that night, I keep hearing the same whisper I heard at the grave. It follows me in my sleep, soft and cold, making my body freeze. People say the souls in Paradise Cemetery were never at peace, and whoever enters takes their voices home with them. I believe it, because their whispers are still with me. Number 2. Birmingham Graveyard. There is a small ghost town in Marshall County, Kentucky, that many people have forgotten. The town's name was Birmingham. Years ago, it was a lively place near the river, but when the Tennessee Valley Authority built the Kentucky Lake, the whole town was flooded and abandoned. Only a few pieces of land remained, and on one of those stands the old Birmingham graveyard. I went there one evening with my cousin. The road was empty, and the air around that place felt strange, almost like time had stopped. The graveyard was hidden behind tall grass and broken fences. Some of the stones were leaning to one side, almost sinking into the ground. I remember one of the oldest stones had no name, just a cross carved into it. As the sun started to set, we walked between the graves. Suddenly, we heard what sounded like the splash of water, even though there was no water nearby. It echoed all around us, like someone was drowning right under the earth. My cousin froze and whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded, my chest tight with fear. Then it happened. From one of the graves near the corner, we heard a muffled cry, like a voice trapped under the soil. The sound grew louder, like someone calling for help but being dragged down deeper and deeper. I dropped my flashlight by mistake, and in that moment of darkness, I felt something cold brush past my arm. It wasn't the wind, it felt like a wet hand. My cousin screamed and pointed at the trees. For a second, I saw a pale figure standing there, half in shadow, half in light. It looked like a woman in an old dress, soaked as if she had come out of the lake. Her head was bent, her hair dripping, and she was staring at the grave we had just heard the cries from. Before I could say anything, she faded into the dark. We ran back to the car as fast as we could. The whole way, the sound of splashing water and faint crying followed us, even though there was nothing behind us. When we finally drove away, my cousin swore he saw wet footprints leading out of the cemetery gate, as if someone had been following us. Since then, I have avoided that place. Locals say the souls of Birmingham were never moved before the town was drowned. Their bodies lie under the lake, restless, and at night they rise near the graveyard, searching for anyone who will listen to their cries. I listened once, and I will never forget it. Number 3. Van Buren Burial Grounds. Deep in Livingston County, Kentucky, there once stood a small river town called Van Buren. Long ago, it was busy with trade along the Ohio River, but floods destroyed it again and again. In time, the people left, and the town disappeared. What still remains, hidden behind the woods, is the old Van Buren Burial Grounds. I went there one cloudy afternoon with a local friend who knew the path. The place was silent, almost too silent. Even the birds refused to sing. The graveyard was small, surrounded by broken stone walls and twisted trees. The earth looked uneven, as if the graves had been sinking for years. We started walking between the graves, reading the faded names. Some stones were so old that the words had washed away. My friend warned me, "Don't stay after sunset. People say the river dead rise when the night comes." I laughed nervously, but I could feel a strange heaviness in the air. As the sky grew darker, we heard something faint, the sound of rushing water. But the river was far away. Then came another sound, a deep groaning, like the ground itself was breathing. Suddenly, one of the graves near us cracked with a loud noise, and the dirt shifted as if something was trying to push through. I froze in fear, staring at the grave. My friend grabbed my arm, whispering, "We need to go." But before we could move, we heard footsteps on the dry leaves behind us. Slow, dragging footsteps. We turned, and there, only a few feet away, was a tall figure. Its clothes were torn, soaked with mud, and its face was hidden by shadow. It swayed as if it could barely stand, but it was moving toward us. My friend shouted and pulled me, and we ran toward the old stone wall. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear those heavy steps following us, getting faster. When we reached the road, the sound suddenly stopped. Out of breath, we turned around, but the graveyard was empty, as if nothing had happened. Later, an old man from the area told me that when the town of Van Buren was abandoned, many bodies were left in unmarked graves. Some say the river claimed their souls, dragging them out whenever the floods came. Others believe they still wander at night, trying to return to the town that no longer exists. I don't know what I saw that evening. But I do know this: in Van Buren Burial Grounds, the dead are not resting. They are waiting, and if you stay long enough, they will find you. Number 4. Scuffletown Cemetery. On the banks of the Ohio River in Henderson County once stood a town called Scuffletown. It was a rough place, filled with river workers, gamblers, and outlaws. When the river floods came and trade slowed, the town slowly vanished. Today, nothing remains except the lonely Scuffletown Cemetery, hidden near the water. I went there with 2 friends just before dusk. The road was muddy, and the air smelled damp, like the river was breathing on us. The cemetery was small and broken, with tilted stones half buried in the dirt. Some of the graves had no markers at all, only piles of rocks covered in moss. As we walked inside, we noticed how quiet everything was. The river was close, but we couldn't hear a single splash of water. The silence felt wrong, heavy, like the air was pressing down on us. My friend nervously joked, "Maybe the outlaws are still guarding this place." None of us laughed. We stayed near the oldest graves, reading the stones. One of them had a name scratched away, almost carved out with a knife. I was staring at it when I heard footsteps behind us. I thought one of my friends had moved, but when I turned around, they were standing still, frozen, their eyes wide. The footsteps grew louder, dragging across the dirt, circling us. My heart pounded as I held my flashlight up. For a moment, I saw a shape between the trees, tall, bent, wearing a hat like a river worker from long ago. His face was pale, his eyes dark holes, and he was watching us. Suddenly, the air grew freezing cold. My breath turned white, and I felt something touch my shoulder, icy and firm, like a hand. I spun around, but nothing was there. My friend screamed, pointing to a grave at the far edge. The dirt was moving, shifting like something was crawling up from underneath. We didn't wait. We ran toward the car, stumbling through the mud. As we reached the road, I could hear laughter, low, cruel laughter, coming from the cemetery. It followed us until we slammed the car doors shut. Later, I learned that Scuffletown was once called a lawless town, where many violent men were buried in shallow graves. Locals say their spirits still wander the cemetery, angry and restless, punishing anyone who dares to walk among them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the sound of boots dragging through dirt, and that same cruel laughter echoing in my head. Scuffletown Cemetery may look empty, but the dead there, they never left. Number 5 Yale Graveyard. There is a place in Kentucky that locals almost never speak about. It is called the Yale Graveyard. Long ago, it belonged to a small town named Yale, but when the town disappeared, only the graveyard remained. The cemetery sits on a lonely hill, surrounded by thick trees. The road leading there is broken and covered with weeds, and people say the silence in that place feels heavier than anywhere else. Those who dare to visit describe the same strange feeling the moment they step through the rusted gate, as if the air itself grows colder, pressing against their skin. The stones are so old that many names cannot be read anymore. Some graves are just marked with rocks, while others lean sideways, half swallowed by the ground. Locals whisper that sometimes, if you stand very still, you can hear soft voices, like someone praying, even though the graveyard is empty. One story tells of a group of teenagers who went there at night on a dare. They carried flashlights, laughing to hide their fear. But when they walked deeper among the graves, their laughter stopped. The beam of light fell on a freshly dug patch of soil, though no one had been buried there in years. They swore they saw the dirt move, as if something beneath was shifting. One boy dropped his flashlight, and as he reached down to grab it, he felt a cold hand brush against his own. Terrified, they all ran, but later that night the boy found long scratches across his arm, thin and red like claw marks. Another tale is about an old man who lived nearby. He claimed he often saw lantern lights moving slowly between the graves, like miners returning home. But when he walked closer, the lights vanished. Some nights he said he could hear the sound of boots crunching on the gravel path, even though no one was there. He passed away years ago, but his family refused to bury him in Yale Graveyard. They said he begged them not to, fearing he would never rest in peace there. Today, people in the nearby towns avoid the place completely. Hunters won't go near it, and even curious travelers leave quickly. The locals say that the dead in Yale Graveyard never truly left, that they are waiting, still restless, still watching anyone who dares to disturb them. If you ever find yourself near that forgotten hill, you will understand why nobody stays long. The silence is too thick, the shadows too deep, and the feeling in the air tells you one thing very clearly: you are not alone. Number 6 Rocky Hill Cemetery. Most people have never heard of Rocky Hill, Kentucky. It was a small place, nothing more than a farming community. But if you ask the old families from that region, they'll tell you Rocky Hill was cursed long before it was abandoned. My uncle used to tell me that during the Civil War, soldiers passed through Rocky Hill, leaving behind stories of hidden graves, executions, and strange disappearances. By the 1900s, people started leaving the town one by one. Farms failed, the rail line closed, and soon the town was just empty houses and a graveyard on the hill. Out of curiosity, I went there with a friend one October night. The road was broken, full of weeds. Most of the houses had collapsed, nothing but chimneys sticking out of the earth like rotten teeth. The graveyard was the only thing still standing strong. Rows of crooked stones, some leaning, some cracked, all covered in moss. The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. The night grew colder, and everything went silent. My friend whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought he meant the silence. Then I heard it too. A low humming sound, like voices chanting deep under the ground. We walked between the graves, our flashlights shaking. One stone had the name carved so deep it looked fresh, though the date said 1863. Suddenly, the ground beneath us shifted like something moved underneath. My friend wanted to leave, but I forced myself closer. That's when I saw a shadow crawling across the stones, long and thin, like a person dragging themselves but with no body to cast it. The humming grew louder, turning into whispers. I couldn't understand the words, but they seemed angry. The air smelled of smoke, like burning wood and flesh. My flashlight flickered out, and in the darkness, I felt cold hands brush against my arms. We ran, stumbling over stones and weeds. Behind us, I swear I heard footsteps chasing us, heavy and fast, though when I glanced back, the graveyard was empty. We didn't stop until we reached the car, our hearts pounding like drums. Later, when I told my uncle what we had seen, he only shook his head and said, "That's why no one lives in Rocky Hill. The dead there never rested. They want company." I don't care what anyone says, Rocky Hill is not abandoned. The buildings might be gone, but the dead still walk there, whispering in the dark, waiting for the foolish who dare to visit their graves. Number 7 Lebanon Junction Cemetery. Lebanon Junction, Kentucky, was once a small railroad town. Most people remember it as a stop for trains and little else. But hidden at the edge of the woods is the old Lebanon Junction Cemetery, a place people avoid even during the day. I first heard about it from a local man at a gas station. He told me in a low voice, "Don't go near the graveyard at night. Folks say the ground there moves, like it's still alive." I thought he was joking, but the way he looked at me, eyes wide, hands shaking, told me he wasn't. One summer night, curiosity got the best of me. I drove down the old road, the tracks of the railroad long rusted and silent. The cemetery sat on a small hill, surrounded by broken stone walls. My flashlight cut through the dark, showing rows of crooked headstones. Some were so old the names had faded away completely. At first, it was quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing. As I walked deeper, I felt the ground soften under my feet. It wasn't mud. It was something else, like the earth itself was shifting. Then came the sound. A scratching, like fingernails against wood. I froze. It was coming from beneath one of the graves. My mind screamed to leave, but my body wouldn't move. Slowly, the sound spread, scratching from not just one grave, but many. Dozens of them, all around me. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, though the trees were still. My flashlight flickered and went out. In the dark, I heard whispers, faint at first, then louder, overlapping each other, calling names I didn't recognize. One voice, deep and broken, whispered right in my ear, "You shouldn't be here." I ran, stumbling between the stones, the earth feeling soft like hands were trying to grab my ankles. Behind me, I could still hear the scratching, now mixed with heavy thuds, as if something was pounding from under the ground, trying to get out. When I finally reached my car, my hands shook so badly I almost dropped the keys. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the cemetery. Tall, thin, with no face, just the outline of something that didn't belong to the living. People in Lebanon Junction don't talk about the cemetery much, but those who know will tell you the same thing, the dead there never stopped moving. Some say the railroad brought more than just people and goods through that town, it brought restless souls who never found peace. To this day, I can't forget that sound. The scratching. The pounding. Like the dead were begging to be let out. Number 8, Eerie Graveyard. Most people don't even remember Eerie, Kentucky. It was supposed to be a booming iron mining town in the 1800s, but the land failed, the company went bankrupt, and families left. All that remains now is the Eerie Graveyard, hidden deep in the woods near the old river. I went there once with a friend who was tracing his family history. His great-great-grandfather had worked in Eerie and was buried there. The graveyard was small, surrounded by broken iron fences and half-buried stones. The air felt heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. We found his ancestor's grave, at least what was left of it. The stone was cracked, the name barely visible. As he cleaned the dirt from the letters, the air suddenly grew colder. We both looked up, and that's when we saw it. A figure stood at the far end of the graveyard. At first, I thought it was a tree shadow, but then it moved, slowly, like it was gliding. My friend whispered, "Do you see that?" I nodded, too afraid to speak. The figure disappeared behind a row of stones, but the sound that followed made my blood freeze. A low metallic scraping, like chains being dragged across rock. The noise circled us, though nothing was there. Suddenly, the ground under one grave shifted. Dirt crumbled, and a crack opened in the soil. From inside came a smell of rust and rot, mixed with smoke. My friend stumbled back, dropping his flashlight. I bent to grab it, and when I stood up, the figure was closer, tall, faceless, its outline shimmering like heat on metal. It raised one hand, long and thin, pointing toward my friend. That's when we heard the voices. Not whispers, but screams. Hundreds of them, echoing through the trees, as if the workers who died in Eerie's mines were crying out all at once. We ran without looking back. I swear the sound of chains followed us until we reached the car. My friend never spoke of it again, but he told me later he sometimes dreams of that graveyard. In his dreams, the figure stands at the foot of his bed, pointing, just like it did that night. Locals say Eerie was cursed from the beginning, that the land took more than it gave. Some even believe the miners were never buried properly, their spirits bound to the iron in the soil. That graveyard isn't just a resting place, it's a prison. I'll never return to Eerie Graveyard. Some places are forgotten for a reason. Number 9, Creelsboro Cemetery. Creelsboro, Kentucky, was once a busy river town. Steamboats stopped there, merchants filled the streets, and life seemed full of promise. But when the river trade died, so did the town. Now, only a handful of ruins remain, and the old Creelsboro Cemetery. I heard about it from a fisherman who swore he saw lights dancing there at night. He said the cemetery sits close to the riverbank, where the fog rolls in so thick it feels like walking through a wall. Against my better judgment, I went there one evening, just before sunset. The cemetery was small, with crooked iron gates and headstones leaning every which way. Some graves were sinking into the earth, half swallowed by time. The river's mist crept across the ground, covering everything in a white sheet. As I walked between the stones, I noticed something strange, fresh flowers on a grave dated 1854. No one lives near there, and no family tends to the place. Still, the flowers looked newly picked. I bent down to touch them, and that's when I felt it, a sudden cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but no one was there. The fog had grown thicker, swallowing the graves behind me. That's when I heard it, a woman's voice, soft and broken, singing an old hymn. The sound echoed, carried by the mist. The singing grew louder, until it seemed to come from all directions. I tried to leave, but the fog closed in. My flashlight cut through only a few feet ahead. That's when a shadow appeared in front of me, tall, thin, and swaying like it floated above the ground. I couldn't see its face, only the outline of a woman in an old dress. The singing stopped. The figure lifted its head slowly, and though the fog hid its face, I felt its eyes on me. The air turned heavy, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Then, from all around, came the sound of splashing, like dozens of people climbing out of the river at once. Shapes moved in the fog, dark and wet, dragging themselves toward the graves. My body froze, but my mind screamed to run. I forced myself forward, stumbling through the mist until I crashed out of the gate. When I looked back, the cemetery was empty. The fog thinned as quickly as it had come. Only the sound of the river remained, calm and steady, as if nothing had happened. Locals say many people in Creelsborough drowned when the river flooded, their bodies buried in haste. Some believe their spirits still rise with the fog, returning to the cemetery to sing and wander in the mist. I'll never forget that song. Even now, sometimes when the night is quiet, I swear I hear it again, soft, broken, and calling from the river. Number 10. Cumberland Falls Mining Camp Graveyard. Cumberland Falls is known for its beauty, the Niagara of the South. But hidden in the woods nearby is something most tourists never see, the remains of an old mining camp, and beside it, the Cumberland Falls Mining Camp Graveyard. I first heard about it from a park ranger who spoke in a hushed voice. He said miners died in accidents, explosions, and cave-ins, and most were buried quickly in that graveyard. Some without names, just wooden markers that rotted away long ago. One cold evening, I decided to see it for myself. The trail was rough, overgrown with vines and fallen trees. By the time I reached the graveyard, the sun had already slipped behind the cliffs. What remained was a cluster of crooked stones and sunken mounds, all hidden beneath tall grass. The air felt strange, still, heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. I stepped closer, and that's when I heard it, the faint clinking of metal, like pickaxes striking rock. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But then it grew louder, echoing through the trees. I froze. There were no mines left open in the area, nothing that could make that sound. Yet it was clear, men working, coughing, and groaning as if they were still trapped underground. My flashlight beam shook as I swept it across the graves. That's when I saw them, shadows moving between the stones. Dark shapes, bent over, carrying invisible loads, their backs arched as if weighed down by rocks. One turned toward me, and though it had no face, I could feel its hollow eyes. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and a deep rumble rolled through the earth. Suddenly, the smell of smoke and coal filled the air, choking me. I stumbled back, but the shadows came closer, dragging their chains across the soil. One reached out with a hand of black dust, brushing my arm. The cold burned straight into my skin. I ran, branches whipping my face, heart pounding. The clinking and rumbling followed me all the way back to the trail. Only when I reached the sound of the river did it finally stop. Locals say the miners who died there never left. Their graves are shallow, their souls restless, doomed to work forever in a mine that no longer exists. Some claim that if you stay too long at the graveyard, you'll hear your name called in the dark, an invitation to join them underground. I'll never return to that place. The beauty of Cumberland Falls hides something far darker nearby, something that should stay buried.